So today we're going to make a traditional Bakewell Tart. The full recipe is on my blog at www.howtomakecakes.co.uk. So the first thing to do is the pastry. You can just go and buy a pre-made sweet or dessert pastry like that, which is fine, but I'll show you how to make one today anyway. So to make a sweet pastry you need 125 grams of unsalted butter at room temperature so it's nice and soft. You need 90 grams, and this is golden caster sugar. Regular caster sugar will be fine, but this just makes it a little bit nicer. You need some plain flour, 250 grams, and 1 large egg. So the first thing to do is to put the flour and the sugar in the bowl and then rub in the butter. So I just mix those two together first, just so that you've got the sugar and the flour mixed together. And then you add your butter, which you've chopped up into small pieces, and then you just use the rubbing in method, where you go from your fingertips with your thumb and rub it in until it ends up resembling breadcrumbs. So when it's all rubbed in, as you can see, it looks a bit like breadcrumbs. Shake it and the bigger lumps will come to the top. Make sure there's no big lumps of fat in it. And that's your base there, and then you just need to mix the egg in and it will become a dough. So just beat the egg up lightly so that the yolk and the white are mixed together. And then we need to add that to the breadcrumb mix. So if you just make a well in there, pour most of it in, maybe not all of it to start with, and just start to combine it together using a knife initially, and then you get your hands dirty and mix it all together. So keep mixing it all together and it will form a nice ball like that. Everything should come off the sides of the bowl. And then you just want to lightly flour the work surface and just knead it a little bit. Flan it out a bit, and then it's best just to chill this in the fridge for a little bit before you actually roll it out. So I make it like that, wrapping some cling film, and put it in the fridge for about half an hour. So once it's chilled in the fridge, flour your work surface, and then you need to roll it out. And plenty of flour to make sure it doesn't stick. Start by just bashing it with a rolling pin, and then you want to roll it out. So you want to roll it out so that it's a little bit bigger than the flan dish that you're using. I'm using a metal one here that's got a loose base, which makes it easier to come out, but you can use sort of the white pottery ones that you get as well. So you want to make the pastry so that it's bigger, because it's got to come up the sides and just go over the edge. So roll it out until it's a little bit bigger, and then transfer it over into the pie dish. So the best way to do it is to try and roll it up on the rolling pin and then transfer it across. So I've rolled it there, and then you pick it up and drop it over and roll it back out like that. And then push the pastry right into the sides, and don't trim it off yet, just push it right in. So the best way to do this, first of all, because I'm going to bake it blind for a short while, is to leave the excess pastry over the end, because the pastry will shrink when it cooks, and this way you can get it to cook first and then trim it down so that you don't end up with the pastry only halfway up the sides of the tart. So put the pastry in like that. To bake it blind, I'm going to put some tin foil just in there, and then I'm using some of these ceramic baking beans, which just keep the pastry flat, and you just sprinkle them on. If you don't have these, you can just put small balls of tin foil or something in it and use that instead. And this will then just cook the pastry a little bit before we put the filling in, so you don't end up with doughy pastry. So we put that in the oven on 180 degrees centigrade for about 15 to 20 minutes, and just bake it blind. So once it's come out of the oven, we'll take the fork, careful, the baking beans will be very hot. And then we can just trim the sides of the pastry. So this is the time to trim it. So trim the sides then by going around there, and the pastry should just fall away. So what you're left with is pastry that isn't quite fully cooked, but it's cooked enough. We're going to put the filling in, and then we'll put it back in the oven to finish off cooking. So while the pastry cools a bit, we'll now make the frangipan filling. So to do that, we're going to need 150 grams of caster sugar. Again, I've got golden caster sugar, but normal white caster sugar is fine. 150 grams of soft margarine. You can use butter, but something like Stork SB is just as good, some cooking margarine. 3 eggs. We have got 150 grams of self-raising flour, and then we're going to have half a teaspoon of some almond essence. We're going to need some jam and some marzipan, but I'll come on to that in a moment. So the first thing to do is to cream together the butter or margarine and the sugar. So into the mixer or into a bowl using an electric whisk, put the softened butter or margarine, add the sugar, and whisk together until it's light and fluffy. So then that should be whisked together so it's nice, light and fluffy texture. And then we're going to add the eggs, just add them one at a time. So add one, whisk it up, add the next one, and so on. So just to ensure that the mixture doesn't curdle at all, just before you add your last egg, just put 1 tablespoon of the flour in, and it helps just stop the mixture curdling. So add that first, and then add your final egg. So now we're ready to add the almond essence. One thing I forgot to say, we should just have a little bit of milk, like an egg cupful of milk, and actually just put your half a teaspoon of almond essence into that, and mix it into the milk first, and it helps it get absorbed into the cake mixture better. So mix those two together, pour that in the mixture, and just whiz that up a little bit, and then we'll fold in our flour. So eventually you'll end up with a nice sponge looking mixture like that, which will go in after we've added our jam and our marzipan. Just stir the jam a little bit first in a ramekin, it makes it easier to spread. So you put that on the bottom and spread it out across the whole flan case. And then this is the slightly unusual bit, we're going to add our marzipan, and the way I'm going to do this, just get the block of marzipan and actually just grate it in. It looks like you're grating cheese into it, but it gives it that lovely almondy taste. So you cover the whole of the base with some grated marzipan, and then we spoon on top of that the frangipan mixture. I just put blobs of it all the way around the case, and then flatten it down a bit, being careful not to stir in the jam. So flatten it out so it goes round to the sides and all the jam's covered. So you'd have sealed everything in so that all you can see now is the frangipan on top, and we'll bake that in the oven on 180 degrees centigrade for about 30 minutes. So when it comes out of the oven, it should be a nice golden brown colour, just springy to touch, and there you have a Bakewell Tart. So once it's cooled, just sprinkle a bit of icing sugar on top for presentation. It can either be served hot as a pudding or cold for afternoon tea.